Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Hermione is one of my favorite characters in Harry Potter, and to be honest, one of my favorite characters in literature as a whole. I really do like Emma Watson in the role, but even so, it's impossible to deny Hermione's portrayal in the films turned out to be far more simplified, idealized, and less alive than the book version. To make sure this doesn't sound like empty words, let's dive into specific examples. I'll show exactly how book Hermione differs from her on-screen counterpart. I'm sure this will be much more interesting. Enjoy the video. Number 1. The unbearable know-it-all. If you ask any fan what quality best defines Hermione, most will say her intelligence. The insufferable know-it-all, as Snape once called her, truly seemed to know everything about everything. But here's the issue. In the films, she's shown almost immediately as a girl with nerves of steel, able to use her knowledge in critical situations. In the books, things are different. During the troll encounter in Philosopher's Stone, Hermione freezes, unable to move, and nearly dies, saved only by her friends. In the movie, though frightened, she acts far braver, hiding, calling for help, even suggesting a spell. The same applies to Devil's Snare. In the film, she stays calm and quickly finds a solution. In the book, she panics, fumbles through her knowledge, and almost breaks down until Harry and Ron point out the obvious answer. This is important. Book Hermione was smart, but her journey toward true courage was long, and that made her character far more realistic. Number 2. A Muggle-born girl. In the books, it's repeatedly emphasized that Hermione grew up in a Muggle family and knew little about the wizarding world. That's why Ron so often explained details to Harry, from the insult mudblood to popular wizarding stories. In the films, though, this role is shifted entirely to Hermione. She seems to know everything, from magical terminology to obscure historical facts. As a result, Ron, one of the richest sources of cultural knowledge in the books, gradually fades into the background. Number 3. Clash of opposites. One fascinating element in the books is the tension between Hermione and Luna Lovegood. These two girls represent opposite worldviews. Hermione trusts logic and facts. Luna clings to stories and fantasies. Their arguments are a true clash of rationality versus whimsical belief. In the films, this dynamic is almost non-existent. Hermione simply observes Luna's eccentricities in silence, and their relationship never really unfolds. That left Hermione missing another crucial facet of her personality. Number 4. No mercy. One of the most striking scenes comes during Moody's lesson in Goblet of Fire. In the film, Hermione is frightened and silent, unable to watch the spider's torment. In the book, however, she raises her hand 3 times, eager to answer, and ultimately speaks the name of the killing curse herself. She's scared, but her instinct to be the top student wins out. This moment showed that book Hermione was not only intelligent, but also obsessed with study. In the film, this detail was lost, leaving her simply compassionate and kind. Number 5. She's better than you. In the adaptations, Hermione increasingly absorbs the actions of other characters. Remember the scene in Prisoner of Azkaban where she shields Harry from Sirius? In the book, that was Ron on a broken leg. Or the Gringotts escape. In the film, the plan belongs to Hermione, but in the book, it's Harry's idea. Little by little, she comes across as the central hero of the story, while Ron is reduced to comic relief. Of course, this boosted her image on screen, but it cheapened the growth of other characters. Number 6. Wise beyond her years. The famous line, "Fear of a name only increases fear of the thing itself," in the books belonged to Dumbledore. In the movie, though, it was given to Hermione. It sounds impressive, yes, but unnatural. In the books, Hermione herself almost always used you-know-who or he who must not be named. Details like this make her seem more superhuman than she really was in the books, where Hermione was an ordinary girl, learning, growing, and making mistakes. Number 7. The obligatory point, appearance. And finally, we can't ignore her looks. In the books, Hermione wasn't described as a beauty. Her hair was bushy, her teeth too large, and her transformation at the Yule Ball was striking precisely because of the contrast. In the films, Emma Watson always looked attractive, and the difference between everyday Hermione and ball Hermione was hardly noticeable. Number 8. Driving force or team player? In the books, Hermione is brilliant, but she is not the leader of the trio. She provides answers, logic, and structure, yet the choices are shared. When Harry finds the Half-Blood Prince's textbook in Half-Blood Prince, it is Harry who experiments with the spells. Hermione, in fact, mistrusts the book and openly disapproves. She warns, "You don't know what that spell does," and she is proven right when Sectum Sempra nearly kills Draco Malfoy. Her role is not to drive the action, but to challenge Harry, to act as the voice of caution. The film changes this dynamic. Instead of Harry's reckless discovery and Hermione's doubts, the movie gives her more of the knowledge, as though she is the one pulling the strings. She feels less like a cautious friend and more like the engine of the group. That shift alters the balance. Harry and Ron become followers, while Hermione takes center stage. It looks powerful, but it takes away the messy teamwork Rowling created, where 3 different personalities clashed, argued, and still managed to move forward together. Number 9. Romantic storyline with Ron. In the books, Hermione's feelings for Ron grow slowly, tangled in jealousy and silence. In Goblet of Fire, after the Yule Ball, her frustration bursts out when Ron criticizes her for going with Victor Crumb. Rowling gives her voice sharp and trembling. "Next time, ask me before someone else does and not as a last resort." It is a raw confession, hidden inside anger. These moments of clumsy honesty build the tension that eventually blossoms into love. The films flatten this arc. Hermione and Ron's quarrels are trimmed down to brief exchanges, almost comic in tone. In Half-Blood Prince, her storm of jealousy over Lavender Brown is played lightly, more like background humour than the breaking point of years of tension. Without the long silences, the fiery arguments, and the aching reconciliation, their romance feels rushed. What Rowling stretched across 7 books becomes, on screen, a subplot that never fully earns its depth. Number 10. Fighter for Justice, SPEW. Hermione's fight for justice shines brightest in Goblet of Fire, when she founds SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. To Harry and Ron, the idea seems absurd. They roll their eyes, laugh, and dismiss it as pointless, but Hermione will not let it go. She spends her free time knitting hats and socks, leaving them for house elves to find, convinced she is liberating them one garment at a time. Rowling writes, Hermione's determination to do something for house elves was unshakable. It is stubborn, funny, and noble all at once. This side of Hermione is completely erased in the films. We never see her heated arguments with Ron, where he insists house elves like their work, and she furiously snaps back that slavery can never be right. We never hear her long speeches in the common room about dignity and freedom. By cutting this, the films reduce her passion, her willingness to look foolish in defense of what she believes. What makes the SPEW storyline so important is that it shows Hermione not just as the smartest student, but as a young activist. She is willing to fight against prejudice, even when her friends do not take her seriously. That fire, that drive to stand for principles no matter the cost, is part of what made her so human in the books. Without it, the Hermione on screen is clever and brave, but missing the rebellious heart that set her apart. Number 11. Humour and weaknesses. In the books, Hermione's flaws make her real. She can be bossy, sharp-tongued, and hilariously stubborn. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Ron mocks her for trusting Crookshanks, she snaps and storms off, leaving Harry awkwardly stuck in the middle. Rowling writes, Hermione flung her bag over her shoulder and stalked away without another word. That image, her storming out in frustration, shows she is not a calm genius all the time. She is a teenage girl with pride and quick temper. There is humour in her blunt honesty too. In Goblet of Fire, she explodes at Ron after the Yule Ball, furious at his jealousy. "Next time there's a ball, ask me before someone else does, and not as a last resort." It is a scene filled with awkwardness, humour, and raw emotion. Readers laugh, cringe, and sympathise with her at once. These imperfections give her warmth. They make her relatable. The films remove most of this fire. On screen, Hermione rarely slams doors or bursts into shouting matches. She is calm, graceful, and endlessly composed. Even during the Yule Ball, her anger at Ron is presented with quiet dignity, more sadness than rage. The messy, funny side of her personality is gone. We don't get to see the moments where she loses control and then regrets it, which in the books only made her more human. Without those flaws, film Hermione sometimes feels less like a teenager and more like a flawless model student. The girl who in the books could be both brilliant and ridiculous, tender and exasperated, is polished into perfection. It looks admirable, but it strips away the charm of seeing a character who can be brilliant one moment and slam a door the next. It was her imperfections, her humour, and her temper that made Hermione more than just a clever witch. Number 12. Leader or assistant? In the books, Hermione is the strategist, not the commander. She provides the logic, the research, and the knowledge that allow Harry to make choices. Rowling is careful to keep Harry as the leader even when he doubts himself. In Deathly Hallows, after Dumbledore's death, Harry struggles with the weight of carrying the mission alone. He questions the Hallows, the Horcruxes, and his ability to continue. Yet it is Harry, not Hermione, who decides to follow Dumbledore's path. "I'll go after the Horcruxes. It's what he wanted. That's what we have to do." His voice trembles, but the decision is his. The film shifts this balance. In the tense scenes, it is Emma Watson's Hermione who holds everything together. Harry is often shown defeated, lost in silence, while Hermione pushes forward with plans, maps, and determination. When Ron leaves, the book gives us Harry's silent resolve to continue, but on screen, Hermione is the one who steadies the group. She feels like the engine of their survival, while Harry fades into the background. This change is striking during the Godric's Hollow sequence. In the book, Harry insists on visiting Bathilda Bagshot, convinced it is the right step despite the danger. Hermione is hesitant, but she follows. It is reckless, but it shows Harry taking charge, flawed and human. In the film, however, the decision feels more mutual, with Hermione carrying much of the confidence. The sense that Harry is the leader, with Hermione as his guide, is weakened. The result is a quieter shift in character dynamics. Book. Hermione shines as the brilliant advisor, the voice of reason who balances Harry's impulsiveness. Film Hermione often takes command outright, which makes her look stronger, but it blurs Harry's role as the chosen leader. Their bond is still powerful, but the hierarchy of the trio is altered. Rowling gave us a leader and his two essential companions. The movies sometimes gave us Hermione and the others following her lead. Number 13, Hermione and friendship conflicts. Hermione's friendship with Harry and Ron in the books is not perfect, and that is what makes it believable. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry's name comes out of the goblet, Ron stops speaking to him. The tension splits the trio apart. Hermione finds herself caught between the two boys. She visits Harry in the common room, whispering, "Ron's not talking to you." "Well, I suppose you've seen the way he's been acting." She tries to help, but she is frustrated, even angry. The conflict feels real because real friends argue, choose sides, and make mistakes. These moments are softened in the films. The argument between Harry and Ron is there, but Hermione never feels truly divided. Emma Watson's Hermione always stands as the voice of reason, calmly urging them to reconcile. She never slams doors or walks away in tears. The messy heart of their friendship, with its silences and sharp words, is lost. What we see instead is an idealized trio that rarely falters. Another strong example comes from Prisoner of Azkaban. When Hermione reports Harry's firebolt broom to Professor McGonagall, Ron explodes. Rowling describes it vividly. "You're trying to get him expelled, aren't you?" Ron shouts. Hermione bursts into tears and retreats to the girls' dormitory. The friendship breaks down for chapters, and readers feel the sting of betrayal and the weight of forgiveness later. That arc makes their bond stronger in the end. In the film, this conflict is a whisper. The firebolt is taken, but the emotional fallout between Ron and Hermione barely exists. There are no slammed doors, no tearful silences, no sense of real fracture. Without these struggles, their friendship looks like a storybook version of loyalty. Yet the truth in Rowling's writing is that deep friendship is forged not by perfect harmony, but by enduring the storms together. Number 14, Courage and Fear. In the books, Hermione's fear is never hidden. When the troll breaks into the girls' bathroom in Philosopher's Stone, she freezes in terror. Rowling writes, "She was shrinking against the wall as though she was trying to sink into the stone, her mouth open with fright." She cannot run or scream. She is a 12-year-old girl who feels real, vulnerable, and human. Her bravery comes not from the absence of fear, but from what she chooses to do afterward, admitting fault to protect Harry and Ron from punishment. The films show a different Hermione. In the troll scene, Emma Watson's Hermione is quick to hide, then crawls between sinks and even shouts for help. She stays active in the danger. The camera gives us a picture of a girl who, even when terrified, has everything under control. It looks heroic, but it takes away the fragile humanity Rowling gave her. The moment of paralyzing fear is gone. Another example lies in the Devil's Snare scene. In the book, Hermione panics. She repeats facts from herbology, but fails to connect them to the situation. "It likes the dark and the damp. Oh, where can I light a fire? There's nothing to burn," she cries in despair, until Ron shouts at her to remember she is a witch. It is clumsy but believable. She is a child under pressure, learning how to think. In Crisis. On screen, the same moment becomes too polished. Hermione is calm. She instructs Harry and Ron to relax, then conjures light to drive the plant back. The fear is almost erased. Viewers see a perfect problem solver rather than a scared teenager grasping for answers. That difference matters. It changes Hermione from a growing character into a near-flawless heroine, and it robs us of the messy, human courage that made her so real in the books. Number 15, Growing Up and Maturity. Hermione Granger's growth in the books is one of the most striking examples of character development in the entire Harry Potter series. J.K. Rowling crafts her as a girl who begins with a deep reliance on rules, books, and regulations, only to evolve into a young woman who learns when to bend and even break those very rules for the greater good. In Philosopher's Stone, Hermione is the girl who proudly proclaims, "Books and cleverness. There are more important things with us, friendship and bravery." This moment reveals the first crack in her reliance on structure, yet the weight of this transformation is gradual and earned. By contrast, in the films, Hermione appears already wise beyond her years, instantly resourceful, and seemingly unshaken by the anxieties that haunt her in the novels. The dynamic tension between her early insecurities and later confidence is flattened on screen, and what should be a journey feels more like a ready-made persona. In the earliest chapters of the books, Hermione is portrayed as almost unbearable to her peers. On the Hogwarts Express, before even stepping into the castle, she corrects Ron's spell attempt and says with smug assurance, "Are you sure that's a real spell? Well, it's not very good, is it?" This haughty tone is deliberate. Rowling wants us to see a girl who hides her nervousness behind authority. Her desire to prove herself often isolates her. When a troll invades the girls' bathroom, it is her admission of lying. "If Harry and Ron hadn't found me, I'd be dead now. I owe you both so much." That marks her first step toward vulnerability and friendship. In the films, this same troll encounter feels more like an action scene than a moment of profound emotional transition. The cinematic Hermione dispatches threats with calm precision, rather than trembling through mistakes. As a result, The sense of her being a child learning to navigate both magic and friendship is diminished. The Hermione of the novels is deeply insecure about her identity. Born to Muggle parents, she hides her vulnerability beneath relentless hard work. Her fear of failure, vividly shown in Prisoner of Azkaban when she uses the time turner to attend every class, reflects an almost frantic desire to be perfect. Rowling lets readers feel the exhaustion and quiet panic of a 13-year-old who tries to carry too much, who cries in Hagrid's hut under the crushing weight of pressure. In contrast, the films transform this into a comedic quirk. Emma Watson's Hermione may look tired or stressed, but she never appears desperate or at risk of breaking. The edges of fear, of overcompensating for her heritage and struggling to prove herself, are smoothed away in favor of a polished image of calm competence. By the time we reach Goblet of Fire, Book Hermione has already begun to channel her intelligence into moral conviction. Her campaign for SPEW is not merely a subplot, it represents her emerging ability to see injustice and act upon it, even if it makes her unpopular. Readers may laugh at the knitted hat she hides in the Gryffindor common room, but these moments mark Hermione's willingness to fight for principles that extend beyond her own reputation. The films eliminate this entirely, stripping away a vital piece of her character's moral development. The audience never sees Hermione's transformation from a girl obsessed with personal achievement to a young activist, someone willing to be mocked for defending others. This loss reshapes how we perceive her growth. The sense of risk and idealism is replaced with a constant, steady voice of reason. Her turning point arrives most vividly in Order of the Phoenix. In the book, Hermione is instrumental in founding Dumbledore's army, yet she does not begin as fearless. She fears expulsion, the wrath of Professor Umbridge, and the danger of rebellion. And yet she organizes the first meeting at the Hog's Head, showing a decisive break from her rigid adherence to rules. The stakes are heightened by her shrewd tactics, such as the enchanted parchment with the members' names, cursed to reveal any traitors. Her transformation is compelling because it is reluctant, hesitant, but ultimately courageous. In the film adaptation, however, Hermione immediately urges Harry to lead the group, delivering a confident speech in a crowded pub. She does not struggle with doubt. Instead, she appears to have been a revolutionary from the very beginning. The delicate balance between her fear and her bravery disappears, leaving a character who feels less human, less fallible. The subtle vulnerability of Book Hermione reaches its most heartbreaking point in Half-Blood Prince. Her silent suffering over Ron's romance with Lavender Brown is described in painful detail. Rowling lets readers see Hermione's internal conflict, her pride, her anger, and her hidden tears. She hexes Cormac McLaggen out of spite, retreats to the girls' bathroom to cry, and shows us that even the most brilliant witch of her age can be undone by love. The films reduce this complexity to a few sharp glares and awkward silences. Emma Watson's performance is excellent, but the script denies her the chance to embody the rawness of a teenage girl wounded by rejection. Hermione's emotional maturation, her ability to endure jealousy and still remain loyal to her friends, is one of her greatest challenges. On screen, it is barely acknowledged. The contrast grows sharper in Deathly Hallows. In the book, Hermione's decision to modify her parents' memories, sending them to Australia for their safety, is written with haunting poignancy. She says goodbye to her family, erasing herself from their lives, and carries that burden quietly. It is a moment that crystallizes her evolution from a rule-abiding schoolgirl into a young woman willing to sacrifice everything. The films rush through this sacrifice in a brief montage, stripping away the moral gravity of the act. Without dwelling on her inner turmoil, the audience cannot feel the immense cost of such a decision. Her growth is flattened into a checklist of brave deeds, rather than a painful journey marked by choice and consequence. Number 16, Hermione and Ron, an equal partnership. In J.K. Rowling's books, Ron Weasley is not a mere shadow trailing behind his friends. He is brave, often insecure, but with flashes of brilliance that remind readers why Harry and Hermione value him. When Harry is paralyzed with nerves before his first Quidditch match in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, it is Ron who bluntly tells him, "You're the best player in the team." That confidence is not comic relief but reassurance, a reminder that Ron can carry weight in a friendship. Hermione, sharp as ever, respects this balance, even if their bickering sometimes suggests otherwise. Together they build a dynamic of equals, two people constantly testing each other's boundaries yet refusing to let go of the bond between them. In contrast, the films often reduce Ron to an accessory. Rupert Grint brings warmth and humour to the role, but the script consistently gives Hermione the decisive lines and moments of triumph. In the Philosopher's Stone film, it is Hermione who reminds Harry how to use the spell to unlock the devil's snare, saying, "It's not logic, it's the wand." Yet in the book, Ron demonstrates initiative in similar scenes, and Hermione has moments of uncertainty. By redistributing these lines, the adaptation tilts the balance. Hermione becomes flawless, and Ron is positioned as someone merely reacting to her cleverness rather than shaping the journey alongside her. The most glaring change is in The Half-Blood Prince. In Rowling's narrative, Ron is essential during Quidditch, a captain who shows that beneath his doubts lies the ability to lead. His triumph against Slytherin is not written as comic luck but as determination, with the text declaring he had never saved more goals in his life. This is a turning point, showing Hermione that Ron is not just Harry's sidekick, but a figure who can shine under pressure. The film brushes this aside, portraying Ron's success as accidental, enhanced by Harry's trick with Felix Felicis. This choice strips Ron of earned competence, leaving Hermione's admiration without true foundation. The equal partnership of Ron and Hermione in the books is also evident in their conflicts. In The Goblet of Fire, when Ron refuses to believe Harry's name was placed in the goblet without his consent, Hermione steps in with fierce loyalty to both boys. She chastises Ron, but her frustration is not one-sided. Ron pushes back, hurt that Harry is always in the spotlight. Here, Hermione is caught between two friends, forced to mediate rather than dominate. The dynamic reveals that she and Ron operate on the same level, stubborn, vulnerable, and equally capable of causing pain. The films flatten this tension, reducing Ron's anger to sulky expressions while Hermione often takes on the role of calm reason, a simplification that diminishes their fiery equality. Even in moments of peril, the novels never portray Ron as dead weight. In The Philosopher's Stone, he sacrifices himself in the life-sized wizard chess match. The book emphasizes his bravery, describing him moving his knight into position, eyes blazing with determination. Harry and Hermione both protest, but Ron insists, accepting the consequences of leadership. It is a strategic and courageous act, one that earns Harry's gratitude and Hermione's respect. In the film, although the chess scene remains, the weight of Ron's sacrifice feels rushed, almost softened by cinematic pacing. The impact is lessened, and Hermione's intelligence overshadows his bravery in the collective memory of viewers. The books allow Ron to show emotional depth that complements Hermione's intellect. In Deathly Hallows, during the tense journey through the wilderness, Ron leaves in anger but returns with profound remorse, saying simply, "I was a prat." That vulnerability does not make him lesser. It makes him human. Hermione's devastation at his departure demonstrates her need for him, not as comic relief, but as emotional anchor. The films, however, exaggerate Hermione's pain while undercutting Ron's return. His moment of courage in rescuing Harry from the icy pond is filmed dramatically, but the context of his inner growth is thinned, as though his action was simply physical rather than deeply emotional. The balance between Hermione and Ron is also visible in the way they share humor in the books. Their banter is not cruel, but affectionate sparring. In Prisoner of Azkaban, after Hermione slaps Draco Malfoy, Ron exclaims, "Can I give you a hand? It was brilliant." This moment is playful, showing admiration, but Hermione also frequently teases Ron, such as when she laughs at his clumsy attempts at magic. The humor goes both ways. In the films, the jokes lean heavily on Ron's awkwardness, his vomiting slugs, his squeaks of fear. While Hermione rarely appears foolish, the humor becomes unbalanced, with Ron as the clown and Hermione as the straight-faced genius, tilting their relationship away from equality. Rowling's writing highlights Ron's ability to comfort Hermione, an often overlooked detail. In Order of the Phoenix, after Hermione is attacked by the centaurs in the Department of Mysteries, Ron is protective, even furious at the injustice. His loyalty is quiet but fierce, a counterbalance to Hermione's logical approach. He might not speak in long explanations, but his presence gives her strength. The films rarely show Ron as a source of comfort. Instead, they depict him as dependent on Hermione's reassurance, reversing the dynamic and implying an imbalance where none existed in the original text. Number 17, Hermione and Magic, Theory versus Practice. Hermione Granger in the books is drawn as a brilliant but imperfect witch, someone whose relationship with magic is grounded in persistence, discipline, and an almost relentless appetite for learning. From her very first appearance in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, she is defined by her desire to master knowledge rather than her natural talent. The films, however, polish this image until it shines too brightly, presenting her as a flawless prodigy who never seems to stumble. This contrast not only shifts how audiences perceive her magical skill, but also alters the underlying message of her story. In the books, Hermione teaches that effort and mistakes are stepping stones to mastery, while in the films she becomes a portrait of impossible perfection. The most telling example comes during her introduction in the first book. On the Hogwarts Express, Hermione proudly recites, "I've learned all our set books by heart, of course," and proceeds to attempt a spell to fix Harry's broken glasses. In the book, the spell does not work as intended. Rowling's words emphasize that Hermione is eager and book-smart, but still unpracticed. Her magic is rough around the edges, reflective of a girl who knows theory, but is still learning the subtleties of wand movement and intention. Yet in Philosopher's Stone, the film version executes the spell with perfect ease, repairing Harry's glasses without hesitation. This single change alters the tone. Instead of showing a young witch striving and fumbling, the audience is presented with a prodigy who can already do advanced magic. Throughout the novels, Rowling carefully balances Hermione's intelligence with moments of failure, allowing readers to see her struggle and grow. In Chamber of Secrets, she spends weeks researching the Polyjuice potion, poring over Moster Potenti potions in the restricted section. Even after all her careful preparation, the result is not flawless. Hermione mistakenly uses cat hair instead of human hair, leading to a painful and embarrassing transformation. Her face sprouting whiskers, her eyes turning yellow, she is left in the hospital wing for weeks. This episode underlines Rowling's central idea: knowledge and hard work do not guarantee perfection, and mistakes are part of the learning process. In the films, however, the Polyjuice transformation scene minimizes Hermione's failure and instead highlights her brilliance in executing the potion. The humorous but important message about fallibility is nearly erased. Another key distinction is visible in Prisoner of Azkaban. In the book, Hermione's schedule with the Time Turner nearly breaks her down. She takes on more classes than any other student, rushing from divination to Muggle studies to arithmancy. Her perfectionism drives her into exhaustion, and her emotional cracks show when she slaps Draco Malfoy after he mocks Hagrid. Her magic here is framed not as innate talent, but as the product of impossible strain. In the film adaptation, much of this struggle is condensed into a single punch and a clever use of the Time Turner. The weariness, the sleeplessness, the raw humanity of her pushing herself too far vanish. The Hermione of the screen seems to carry infinite energy, her spells always precise, her presence always calm. The novels emphasize that even Hermione's wand work requires trial and error. During the defense against the dark arts classes in Goblet of Fire, Rowling depicts her struggling alongside her classmates to master the summoning charm. She practices repeatedly before the Yule Ball, determined to perfect the spell. She does not summon objects effortlessly. She sweats, rehearses, and refines her technique. When Harry later uses Accio Firebolt during the Triwizard Tournament, Hermione's earlier practice serves as the foundation. Yet the films gloss over this detail, leaving audiences with the impression that Hermione could always perform such charms without trouble. The teaching element, that magic requires diligence, is sacrificed for speed. One of Hermione's most humanizing mistakes appears in Order of the Phoenix when she creates enchanted coins to organize Dumbledore's army. The spellwork is advanced, involving protean charms typically far beyond a fifth year's reach. Rowling makes clear that Hermione spends long hours researching, testing, and refining the idea. Her success is not instantaneous. She admits to Harry and Ron that she experimented with several magical methods before finding one that worked. In the films, this ingenuity is reduced to a single moment of brilliance, as if she conceived and executed the magic without any failures along the way. The cinematic Hermione seems to pull spells from her sleeve with unerring confidence, while the literary Hermione toils in the library and admits uncertainty. Rowling's writing constantly highlights Hermione's vulnerability to mistakes. In Half-Blood Prince, when she tries to brew the draught of living death in potions class, her potion is described as mediocre compared to Harry's, who follows the Half-Blood Prince's scribbled notes. Slughorn gives Harry a vial of Felix Felicis for his superior work. Hermione, the one who studies hardest, is outshone, and her disappointment is palpable. This moment is essential, reminding readers that discipline and hard work do not always yield immediate success, and sometimes others will surpass you. The film adaptation erases this moment almost entirely, giving little space to Hermione's struggle or her jealousy. On screen, her magical competence never falters. Number 18. Humor by J.K. Rowling and its loss in films. Hermione Granger in the books is not only the brightest witch of her age, but also one of the funniest. Her humor is not always deliberate. Often it comes from her stubbornness, her rigid adherence to rules, and her habit of quoting textbooks as if they were sacred scripture. This quality makes her much more than just the serious and studious character people often remember. When she blurts out lines like, "I checked this out weeks ago for a bit of light reading," while holding a book the size of a small boulder, readers can't help but laugh. It is a kind of humor rooted in character, not in jokes, but in the mismatch between her seriousness and the absurd situations around her. This version of Hermione, so vivid on the page, is softened in the films, where the humor is stripped away in favor of a polished, flawless image. Rowling's Hermione is funny precisely because she does not try to be. She is the girl who raises her hand so vigorously in class that she nearly falls out of her chair, the one who knows the answer before the question is even asked. When Professor Snape snaps at her in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for being an insufferable know-it-all, it stings, but it also reveals why she is so amusing. She embodies the exaggerated qualities of a perfectionist student, and in doing so, she becomes recognizable to readers who have seen that classmate or been that classmate themselves. In the films, this sharp edge of humor is dulled. She still raises her hand, but not with the same desperate eagerness, and the movie camera rarely lingers on her quirks long enough for the joke to land. The banter between Hermione and Ron Weasley in the books is a constant source of light-hearted comedy. Their arguments, laced with sarcasm and irritation, often turn into some of the funniest moments in the series. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Hermione fumes at Ron's cluelessness during the Yule Ball fiasco, snapping at him about asking her sooner if he had wanted her as his partner. Ron's obtuse reaction makes the scene comedic gold, but it is Hermione's mixture of exasperation and sharp wit that drives the humor. In the films, this becomes more of a simple squabble. The subtle balance of affection and irritation that Rowling captured with words is often flattened into awkward tension or omitted altogether. Hermione's brand of humour in the books often comes through her sarcasm. She has a talent for delivering cutting remarks that border on witty without breaking her earnest nature. In Chamber of Secrets, when Ron makes fun of her knowledge of spells, she snaps back with icy precision, "At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in. They got in on pure talent." It is sharp, clever, and undeniably funny, especially because it comes from Hermione, who is usually seen as the moral compass. In the films, the line is present, but the delivery lacks the spark of humour. The cinematic Hermione becomes more of a calm dispenser of wisdom than the fiery, sarcastic wit Rowling originally created. One of the most overlooked comedic aspects of Hermione in the books is her over-preparation. She is the student who reads Hogwarts, a history, so many times that she quotes it at every opportunity, to the point where Harry and Ron groan whenever she opens her mouth. In Prisoner of Azkaban, her obsession with her time-turner and her frantic schedule becomes unintentionally funny. Readers watch her exhaust herself while still insisting she can handle everything. Her breakdowns are tinged with comedy because they are so exaggeratedly Hermione, always striving for more than any human could achieve. In the films, this side of her is nearly invisible. The movie Hermione seems to glide through her studies with ease, rarely allowing us to laugh at her frantic perfectionism. The books also allow Hermione's humour to shine in moments of hypocrisy. She lectures Harry and Ron on following the rules, yet constantly joins them in breaking them. This double standard, which she often justifies with long-winded explanations, is amusing because it reveals her human contradictions. In Sorcerer's Stone, she berates the boys for sneaking around at night, only to join them minutes later when she realizes adventure might be necessary. Rowling lets the reader laugh at her seriousness bending under pressure. The films smooth out this contradiction, portraying her more consistently as the perfect, rule-abiding student who only breaks rules when absolutely necessary. The comedy of her rationalizations is lost. Another element absent from the films is the sheer number of Hermione's verbal clashes with Ron that are played for laughs. In Order of the Phoenix, when Ron tries to assert his authority as a prefect, Hermione undermines him with her sharp corrections and mocking tone. She is not just scolding him, she is reveling in being right, which adds a layer of humour to their rivalry. The film version cuts down these interactions, making their relationship more one-dimensional. Instead of the playful, sarcastic dynamic, we get a muted back and forth that lacks the spark of Rowling's humour. Hermione's humour also thrives in her relationship with Harry. While she is often the voice of reason, her blunt honesty creates comedic moments. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry insists he did not put his name in the goblet, she tells him with complete seriousness, "Of course you didn't, but that doesn't stop you being reckless." The humour comes from the mixture of loyalty and exasperation, her ability to support him while still pointing out his flaws. The films, however, tend to turn Hermione into a constant pillar of calm encouragement, removing the humorous exasperation that made her such a relatable friend in the books. One of the greatest examples of Hermione's humour in the books comes during Prisoner of Azkaban, when she slaps Draco Malfoy. The humour lies not only in the act itself, but in the build-up, her mounting frustration, Malfoy's smugness, and the sudden explosion of energy from the supposedly studious Hermione. It is a cathartic moment, funny in its shock value, and in the way it completely overturns her reputation as a rule-following bookworm. The films include the slap, but the tone is different, played more as drama than comedy, missing the delightfully humorous release that Rowling gave the moment. Humour in the books often comes from Hermione's literal-mindedness. When confronted with nonsense, she responds with long, serious explanations that make the situation even funnier. In Sorcerer's Stone, when Harry and Ron panic about their first flying lesson, Hermione recites passages from a book about broom safety. The absurdity of reading regulations aloud while everyone else is nervous gives the scene its humor. The films often skip these moments, reducing Hermione to a quick remark rather than allowing her full, pedantic explanations that make readers laugh. Even her interactions with authority figures contain humor. In Goblet of Fire, her campaign for house elf rights, known as SPEW, is both admirable and unintentionally funny. Her earnestness, contrasted with Ron's eye-rolling dismissal and Harry's bewilderment, creates comedy out of her idealism. Readers laugh not because they mock her cause, but because of how fiercely she throws herself into it, complete with badges, pamphlets, and recruitment speeches. The films omit SPEW entirely, and with it, one of Hermione's richest veins of comedic potential. Rowling also uses Hermione's strict logic as a tool for humor. In Half-Blood Prince, when Harry suspects Draco is up to something sinister, Hermione dismisses his theory with exasperated logic, insisting it is impossible. The comedy comes when readers know Harry is right, and Hermione's overconfidence makes her look almost foolish. Her seriousness, when placed against unfolding absurdities, makes her funnier than any joke could. The films rarely allow Hermione to be wrong, turning her into an almost flawless figure and erasing the humor that comes from her mistakes. Another comedic strength in the books is Hermione's impatience with foolishness. She constantly scolds Ron for his lack of preparation or his sloppy spell work, and these scoldings are so exaggerated that they become funny. In Chamber of Secrets, when Ron's broken wand backfires, Hermione delivers her disapproval with such righteous indignation that it adds levity to the chaos. The films streamline these reactions, often showing Hermione as mildly irritated rather than explosively exasperated, thereby reducing the humor. Perhaps the biggest loss of humor in the films is how they elevate Hermione into a near-perfect heroine at the expense of her quirks. In the books, she is funny because she is flawed, too eager, too strict, too logical, too righteous. Her humor flows naturally from these qualities, from the way she collides with the chaos of the wizarding world. The films give us a sleeker Hermione, still brilliant, but missing the clumsy, pedantic, sarcastic girl who once made readers laugh aloud. The humor Rowling wrote so carefully is replaced with solemnity, and in doing so, the films strip away part of her humanity. Number 19. Attitude toward rules. Hermione Granger, in the pages of J.K. Rowling's books, begins her journey as the purest example of what it means to be a rule-abiding student. From the moment she appears in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, she clutches the school rules as if they were sacred scripture. She scolds Harry and Ron for sneaking around at night. She insists on following every detail of Hogwarts etiquette, and she even admits proudly that she has read all the set books and more besides. Her early identity is built around a rigid respect for structure and order. The books emphasize this side of her with consistency, creating a vivid image of a young girl whose greatest strength lies in her discipline and her unwavering respect for authority. The transformation of this book, Hermione into a more flexible and rebellious fighter, is slow, deliberate, and deeply meaningful. Each novel adds a layer of complexity, showing her gradual willingness to break the rules, but always in the name of justice or survival. In the first book, when she helps Harry and Ron stop Professor Quirrell from reaching the Philosopher's Stone, her participation is a shocking breach of her strict adherence to rules. Yet even then, she justifies herself by pointing out that there are more important things, friendship and bravery. This moment marks the start of a character arc in which her devotion to rules is gradually balanced by her sense of morality and courage. By the time the trio reaches their second year in Chamber of Secrets, Hermione has already begun bending her own code. She brews Polyjuice Potion in a bathroom, a dangerous and highly forbidden act. Rowling takes care to highlight the gravity of this choice. Hermione is not the type to dismiss the rules casually. Instead, she recognizes the necessity of the crime in order to uncover the truth about the chamber. This makes the act more powerful because it demonstrates the scale of her sacrifice. The Hermione of Book 1 would never have imagined committing such an offense, but the Hermione of Book 2 dares it because she has learned that rules, when used to cover up injustice, can be bent. In the third book, Prisoner of Azkaban, the shift continues. Hermione uses a time turner, authorized by the Ministry but still bound by immense restrictions. She ends up breaking those restrictions when she and Harry rescue Sirius Black and Buckbeak. Her rebellion here is not casual but calculated. She knows she risks expulsion and perhaps worse punishment, yet she values the life of an innocent man and a condemned creature more than her own spotless academic record. The Hermione of the books evolves into someone who recognizes that morality must outweigh blind obedience. Rowling makes this shift clear through the stakes of the story, where rules imposed by authorities like Cornelius Fudge are shown to be unjust or flawed. When we reach Goblet of Fire, the difference becomes even more striking. Hermione is still devoted to knowledge and order, yet her activism comes forward in a new way. She launches SPEW, her campaign for House Elf rights. While the act may seem small compared to facing Death Eaters, it reflects her development into someone willing to question authority, traditions, and the very system of the magical world. In the book, this is a pivotal moment because it signals that Hermione no longer views rules as absolute. Instead, she sees them as constructs that can perpetuate injustice. Her argument that you should be ashamed when wizards ignore elf slavery is another proof that she has grown beyond the timid student terrified of breaking school regulations. By the time of Order of the Phoenix, the arc reaches a climax. Hermione takes the lead in forming Dumbledore's army, an organization that defies the Ministry's ban on practical defense lessons. The act is one of total rebellion. She is the one who conceives the idea, persuades Harry to teach, and then arranges the secret meetings. This Hermione is not merely following Harry's lead, but actively shaping the resistance. Her commitment to this illegal activity, done in defiance of Dolores Umbridge, is a powerful reminder of how far she has come from the girl who once chastised Harry for sneaking out of bed. Rowling portrays this moment as the true flowering of her courage, a transformation that makes her not only book-smart, but also morally fearless. In the later books, Hermione's readiness to break the law intensifies. In Half-Blood Prince, she uses magic to attack Ron's new girlfriend Lavender Brown with a flock of conjured birds. More significantly, she accepts the destruction of Horcruxes as a necessary mission, even though it involves theft, trespassing, and deception. By the final book, Deathly Hallows, Hermione has fully abandoned her earlier devotion to rules. She wipes her parents' memories, breaks into the Ministry of Magic, and participates in the Battle of Hogwarts with no hesitation. This progression illustrates Rowling's careful design. Hermione is not static, but dynamic, learning that true bravery often means breaking the rules to protect what is right. The films, however, collapse much of this careful arc. From the very beginning, movie Hermione is portrayed as someone already comfortable with breaking rules. In Philosopher's Stone, her scolding tone is present, but the films often skip over the lengthy descriptions of her rule obsession. Instead, Emma Watson's version feels immediately aligned with Harry and Ron's adventurous side. For example, in the movie version of the Polyjuice Potion in Chamber of Secrets, Hermione's determination is portrayed almost as if she relishes the act rather than agonizing over its illegality. This diminishes the weight of her choice. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the shift is even clearer. In the book, her rescue of Sirius and Buckbeak is depicted as a monumental act of courage against the rules of the Ministry. In the film, the sequence moves so fast that the weight of her rebellion is lost. The sense that Hermione, the rule-keeper, is crossing into rebellion is barely emphasized. She comes across instead as naturally brave and resourceful, which is admirable but lacks the character growth Rowling designed. The absence of SPEW in the films is another striking example of how Hermione's arc was reduced. The Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, though often mocked by other characters, represents Hermione's moral independence. She fights not only for her friends, but also for those who cannot defend themselves, showing her willingness to challenge centuries of tradition. The films ignore this subplot entirely, erasing a defining feature of her evolution. Without it, Hermione's journey toward questioning the wizarding system loses much of its force. When the story reaches Order of the Phoenix, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. In the books, Hermione is the mastermind behind Dumbledore's army. In the film, however, the emphasis falls almost entirely on Harry as the leader and motivator. Hermione supports him, yes, but her critical role as the organizer is undercut. This change not only diminishes her agency, but also removes the narrative thread that demonstrates how she finally embraced breaking rules for justice. What Rowling painted as Hermione's greatest moment of rebellion becomes in the films a background detail. The films also soften her moral dilemmas. In the books, Hermione constantly calculates the cost of breaking rules, often agonizing over whether the ends justify the means. In the films, she appears almost carefree about rebellion, acting with confidence and assurance from the start. This creates a flatter character. Viewers are presented with a Hermione who is consistently brave and smart, but miss the gradual nuanced transformation from a rigid rule keeper into a morally complex fighter for justice. Even in Deathly Hallows, where the stakes are life and death, the difference is clear. In the books, Hermione's act of erasing her parents' memories is described with heart-wrenching detail, showing the immense sacrifice of someone who has always valued family and order. The films condense this moment into a brief scene, powerful but stripped of context, leaving little room for the reader to appreciate how this act represents the final stage of her departure from her old self. What we lose in the films is the sense of tension and sacrifice that defines Hermione's journey. In the books, every rule she breaks carries a shadow of fear and hesitation, making her eventual courage resonate more strongly. In the films, that tension is absent because Hermione seems fearless from the start. While Emma Watson delivers a commanding performance, the narrative framing reduces the impact of her rebellion, making her bravery feel like a given trait rather than an earned evolution. Thus, Hermione Granger in the books and Hermione Granger in the films emerge as two related but ultimately distinct characters. The first is a brilliant, bookish girl who begins as a disciple of rules and gradually transforms into a rebel willing to challenge the system itself. The second is a brave, loyal heroine who appears rebellious almost from her first moments on screen. Both are compelling, but only one carries the weight of growth and transformation that Rowling intended, reminding us how rules can shape us and how breaking them carefully and with purpose can become the truest act of courage. Number 20, compassion and humanity. Hermione Granger's character in J.K. Rowling's books is built on layers of intellect, moral courage, and deep compassion, but when her story was adapted into films, many of the subtle qualities that made her so profoundly human were quietly stripped away. In the novels, Hermione's compassion is not an accessory. It is the very foundation of her actions. She cannot bear to see suffering, whether it comes from her fellow students, misunderstood creatures, or even the most unlikable individuals. In contrast, the films often reduce her to a figure of quick wit and sharp spells, leaving little space for the quiet humanity that defined her. This contrast between book and screen versions reveals not just creative choices, but a transformation that reshaped the way millions came to perceive Hermione. One of the most telling examples of Hermione's compassion in the books is her defense of Neville Longbottom. From their first year onward, Neville often appears timid, forgetful, and clumsy, a target for ridicule by classmates. Yet Hermione consistently steps in to support him. When Neville loses his courage or stumbles in lessons, Hermione treats him with patience and care. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Neville is mocked after forgetting the common password, but Hermione never joins in the laughter. She encourages him and later helps him gain confidence. This protection may seem small compared to dueling death. Eaters, but it illustrates her instinctive kindness toward those overlooked. The films, however, rarely linger on her quiet gestures toward Neville. Instead, Neville's journey to bravery seems disconnected from Hermione's support, erasing the nurturing role she played in his growth. Her care extends not only to people, but also to creatures. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione grows deeply concerned for Crookshanks, the ginger cat she adopts. She insists that Harry and Ron treat him with respect, even when Ron accuses the cat of hunting scabbers. Her attachment to Crookshanks is more than affection for a pet. It demonstrates her empathy for beings dismissed by others. Rowling writes, Hermione took Crookshanks very seriously. She bought him every treat and toy at the magical menagerie and insisted he had feelings that deserved respect. This perspective reflects her broader worldview. All living things deserve dignity. Yet in the films, Crookshanks is little more than a background detail, a silent creature with no real connection to Hermione's compassion. Perhaps the clearest symbol of Hermione's moral conscience in the books is SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. Introduced in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, this campaign becomes Hermione's personal crusade. She is horrified to learn how house elves are treated, bound to serve wizards without pay, without rights, and often without even gratitude. While her peers dismiss the issue as unimportant, Hermione refuses to ignore the injustice. You know, house elves get a very raw deal, she exclaims. It's slavery, that's what it is. These words underline her refusal to accept cruelty as normal. The films omit this subplot entirely, removing a defining element of her character. Without SPEW, the screen, Hermione loses the chance to demonstrate her moral stubbornness, her willingness to stand alone for those without a voice. This change is not minor. SPEW in the book shows Hermione at her most human, willing to channel her intellect into activism even when others laugh at her. She knits hats to free elves, lectures her friends on justice, and badgers the school for reforms. While her efforts are sometimes naive, they reveal a heart that burns with indignation against unfairness. By ignoring this arc, the films flatten Hermione into little more than Harry's strategist and Ron's eventual love interest. They silence the part of her that feels the suffering of others as if it were her own. Without this struggle, audiences miss how her compassion distinguishes her from many in the magical world, who often shrug at inequality. Even her interactions with Harry and Ron in the books reveal her role as a source of comfort. After Harry's disastrous trip to Hogsmeade in Prisoner of Azkaban, when he feels isolated and angry, Hermione reaches out quietly. She provides reassurance without judgment, simply by being present. Similarly, in Order of the Phoenix, when Harry lashes out after the trauma of Cedric Diggory's death, Hermione responds not with anger, but with patience, trying to anchor him. Rowling describes her as looking at him with concern etched on her face, as though she bore part of his burden. This emotional support is barely hinted at in the films, where Harry often seems to struggle alone, and Hermione's role is limited to clever suggestions during missions. The compassion she shows is also visible in her treatment of magical creatures beyond Crookshanks and house elves. In Prisoner of Azkaban, she becomes the most devoted defender of Buckbeak, the hippogriff condemned to death after Malfoy's provocation. While Hagrid despairs, Hermione tirelessly researches legal defenses and petitions for justice. Her tears at Buckbeak's execution reflect not just sorrow for a creature, but outrage at a system that bows to wealth and power. Her emotional investment here paints her as someone who instinctively sides with the oppressed. The films portray Buckbeak's story, but the driving force of Hermione's advocacy fades into the background, leaving her reduced to a bystander rather than the passionate defender she is in the books. Another striking moment of humanity comes in Order of the Phoenix, when Hermione shows understanding toward Luna Lovegood. Many students ridicule Luna for her eccentric beliefs and dreamy demeanor, but Hermione treats her with respect. She may disagree with Luna's ideas, but she does not mock her. Instead, she recognizes Luna's isolation and quietly includes her in the group. Rowling emphasizes this through Luna's own acknowledgement of Hermione's kindness, a subtle but important sign of Hermione's empathy. On screen, Luna's presence is memorable, but Hermione's role in softening the group's acceptance of her is minimized. What remains is less of Hermione, the compassionate classmate, and more of Hermione the sharp, practical fighter. Her humanity is not flawless, which makes it more believable. She can be impatient, judgmental, even harsh when frustrated, yet these flaws serve as contrast to her moments of extraordinary empathy. When she admits to Harry in Half-Blood Prince that she understands the pain of jealousy because of her feelings for Ron, she demonstrates vulnerability. When she comforts Harry after Dumbledore's death, she reveals strength not through spells but through presence. The films, by focusing on her external brilliance and bravery, miss these subtle cracks that reveal her depth. Compassion is often about fragility as much as strength, and book Hermione embodies both. The absence of these details in the films reshapes her relationships. In the novels, Hermione and Neville share a bond built on her early defense of him. With Luna, she develops quiet solidarity. With house elves, she models how the wizarding world should evolve. These bonds show her humanity stretching outward, weaving connections that go beyond the trio. In the films, her world feels narrower, defined primarily by Harry and Ron. This narrowing strips away the sense of Hermione as a bridge between the strong and the vulnerable, the voice for those unheard. One cannot ignore how this shift impacts the legacy of her character. In the books, Hermione is not just brilliant and brave, she is moral, emotional, and deeply empathetic. She teaches readers that intelligence without compassion is empty. In the films, however, she becomes a symbol of action, cleverness, and competence, admirable but incomplete. The absence of her activism, her nurturing, her quiet emotional labor makes her easier to categorize, but harder to truly understand. The Hermione that millions of readers fell in love with is more than a heroine. She is a reminder of the power of kindness. Even small omissions change the emotional texture of the story. The Hermione who knits hats for elves, who comforts Neville, who advocates for Buckbeak, who respects Luna, adds warmth to the narrative. Without her, the films lean colder, more focused on battles and plot twists. Her compassion is what makes Hogwarts feel like a place where humanity still flickers even in dark times. To lose that is to lose a vital part of what made the books resonate so deeply with readers. It is easy to see why the films made these changes. Subplot slow pacing, activism can appear too complex for a blockbuster, and emotional nuance is harder to capture in 2 hours than action sequences. Yet in cutting these threads, the films inadvertently reshaped Hermione's essence. They left audiences with a figure who is strong and smart, but robbed of the compassion that made her so beloved. To read the books after watching the films is to rediscover a Hermione who breathes with humanity, one who feels the pain of others and dares to challenge injustice, no matter how small. Number 21, Emotions, an Inner World. Hermione Granger in J.K. Rowling's books is never a flat character, never a one-dimensional sidekick to Harry Potter. She is a storm of emotions wrapped inside the body of a brilliant girl. Her brilliance never overshadows her humanity, and her emotions pulse through nearly every chapter where she appears. When Ron criticizes her after the Yule Ball in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the words cut deep. Rowling shows her running away in tears, her face hidden, the ink on the page almost trembling with her pain. The text reads, "Hermione's eyes were swimming with tears. You're so infuriating," she screamed, and she stormed away. That moment tells the reader that her intelligence cannot shield her from the raw sting of rejection. It shows that beneath her fierce independence and knowledge lies a vulnerable girl who longs for acceptance and respect. The reader feels her pain as something deeply human, an echo of teenage insecurity. The films reduce this storm to a drizzle. In the cinematic adaptation of the same scene, Emma Watson as Hermione does not display the same intensity. She looks wounded, yes, but the tears are barely there, the eruption of emotion muted. The camera captures her with a look of hurt pride, but it never lingers on her devastation. The difference matters because in the book, Hermione's tears mark one of the most pivotal shifts in her relationship with Ron. Her pain creates a rift that deepens the narrative tension. In the film, however, the tension is flattened. The audience sees only a yours. Proud young woman turning away, rather than a girl crushed by the casual cruelty of someone she trusted. Rowling's Hermione is repeatedly shown as emotionally vulnerable, a girl who can cry, sulk, or explode in righteous anger. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when Ron dismisses her concern for Crookshanks and sides with his pet Scabbers, she breaks under the pressure. She burst into tears, threw her arms around Harry, and ran sobbing toward the girls' staircase. Her tears are not merely for the lost cat food battles with Ron, but for the accumulated frustration of being dismissed, misunderstood, and mocked by her own friends. This emotional rawness grounds her. She may be clever enough to brew Polyjuice Potion at 12, but she is also a young girl who feels isolation and despair. She is not invincible, and Rowling insists that her intelligence does not protect her from loneliness. On screen, this scene is simplified to brief exchanges of annoyance. The conflict over Crookshanks barely registers, and Hermione's emotional breaking point disappears almost entirely. Without her collapse into tears, her role becomes more of a steady companion who reacts calmly to tension. The movie Hermione remains rational, controlled, almost motherly, which erases the complexity Rowling drew. Instead of an emotionally battered girl needing comfort, the films present an efficient student who shrugs off problems with poise. It turns the Hermione of the books, complex, imperfect, vulnerable, into a Hermione of the screen who rarely falters. The same contrast is found in Hermione's moments of courage. In the books, bravery often emerges through trembling lips and pounding hearts. When she faces the troll in Sorcerer's Stone, Rowling writes, "Hermione flung her arms around Harry. 'Harry, you're a great wizard, you know.' Her relief and gratitude come with tears and with trembling. She is terrified, overwhelmed, but her emotions allow her to bond with her friends. The troll scene is less about cleverness than about the emotional breakthrough that births their friendship. The book lingers on her fragility. The cleverest girl at Hogwarts nearly died, and in her tears she admits that rules and knowledge cannot protect her from everything. In the film, that same scene becomes a showcase of composure. Emma Watson delivers the famous line with confidence rather than fragility, her voice steady, her face dry. The scene ends with a sense of triumph, not emotional vulnerability. By stripping away the trembling gratitude, the film discards the beating heart that binds the trio. Instead of a moment of tears gluing them together, the audience sees a clever girl acknowledging bravery. The humanity of fear, of crying after almost dying, is absent. A child who has just survived a troll would realistically be shaken. Book Hermione is human, film Hermione is polished. Rowling also writes Hermione with righteous anger that bleeds through the page. In Order of the Phoenix, after Ron and Harry fail to take her seriously, she lashes out. "Just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have," Hermione snapped. This is not casual banter, it is the frustration of a girl exhausted from being treated as the nagging voice of reason. Her sharp words are born of accumulated irritation, and they sting because they reveal her inner exhaustion with carrying the burden of foresight alone. This Hermione vents, and she vents loudly, showing the reader her frayed patience. The films keep the line, but the venom is dulled. Emma Watson delivers it almost playfully, like a witty remark tossed between friends. The sting of her frustration, the weight of her emotional burden, is softened into a joke. The audience chuckles, the anger is forgotten. Yet in the book, the line is not for laughs, it is a confession of strain, a protest against being minimized. Once again, the cinematic Hermione appears cooler, easier, less volatile, while Rowling's Hermione bleeds emotion in every syllable. Consider also the scene in Deathly Hallows when Ron abandons Harry and Hermione. Rowling paints Hermione's reaction as devastation. Hermione threw herself into a chair, her face in her hands, her shoulders shook. "How could he?" she cried. She is not calm, not poised, she is shattered, broken by the departure of someone she loves. Her sobs echo in the tent, a haunting sound of betrayal and heartbreak. This is the Hermione who has carried unspoken feelings for Ron across years of conflict, and now those feelings erupt in sorrow. The film dilutes the devastation. Hermione looks sad, yes, but she does not collapse. She does not sob. She maintains composure, almost dignified in her suffering. The camera frames her with quiet tears rather than uncontrollable grief. It is a choice that reshapes her entirely. The book shows a Hermione whose emotions overwhelm her. The film shows a Hermione who endures with quiet dignity. That quietness removes her humanity. People shatter when loved ones leave, and Rowling gave Hermione permission to collapse. The film denied her that right. One of the most poignant moments in the books comes during the Yule Ball. After dancing with Victor Crumb, Hermione is radiant, glowing, filled with the joy of being seen as more than the bookish girl. But when Ron lashes out, Rowling writes, Hermione's eyes were glistening with tears. Next time there's a ball, ask me before someone else does, and not as a last resort. Her tears here are not only for Ron's words, but for the years of being overlooked, taken for granted, valued only for her intellect. It is the cry of a girl who longs to be cherished. This Hermione, beneath the glittering dress, still aches for validation. The film renders the scene with clipped dialogue and restrained emotion. Emma Watson speaks with stern dignity rather than tears, her voice breaking slightly, but never collapsing. She storms away in anger, not in heartbreak. The subtle difference is enormous. Book, Hermione bleeds vulnerability, while film Hermione shields herself with fury. Vulnerability becomes anger, and with that shift, the audience loses the fragile heart of her character. Even in smaller moments, Rowling saturates Hermione with emotion. When Harry almost loses his broom in Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione bursts into tears of relief after his survival. When she punches Draco Malfoy, her hand trembles with the adrenaline of outrage. When she discovers Harry has been secretly planning with Ron, her fury erupts in a full-blown fight. Each of these moments roots her as a girl whose intellect is matched only by her emotions. She feels everything too deeply, and that is why readers love her. She is not a machine of logic, but a human of contradictions. Cinematically, many of these moments are streamlined into controlled responses. The punch to Draco is delivered with confidence, not trembling adrenaline. The broomstick scare passes without tears, the fights are trimmed, and Hermione's part in them minimized. Film Hermione seems less raw, less volatile. She is consistently in control, almost too composed. By sanding down her extremes, the filmmakers gave the audience a Hermione who is admirable but less real. The heartbeats of fear, anger, and sorrow that Rowling inked into her character have been smoothed into polished gestures. What emerges from this contrast is not a condemnation of Emma Watson's performance, but a recognition of adaptation choices. Watson played Hermione as poised, elegant, and mature beyond her years. It made her Hermione inspiring, but it also stripped away the jagged edges that made her so relatable in the books. Rowling's Hermione can cry, can rage, can sulk, can tremble. Film Hermione rarely crosses those lines. It is the difference between a girl who feels too much and a girl who masters her feelings too quickly. For readers, the loss is palpable because it was in her imperfections, her outbursts, and her tears that Hermione truly lived. Number 22, Hermione's legacy. Hermione Granger's journey across J.K. Rowling's 7 books is one of the most compelling arcs in the entire Harry Potter saga, and yet when those same events were brought to the screen, the interpretation often leaned in a different direction. In the novels, Hermione is written as a young woman with an unshakable sense of justice, a willingness to confront authority, and a relentless drive to change the world around her. By the end of the series, readers are not surprised when the epilogue reveals she becomes a prominent political leader, working in the Ministry of Magic to correct injustices. This outcome feels like the natural extension of the girl who once knitted hats for house elves and who reminded Harry and Ron Just because it's taken you 3 years to notice, Ron, doesn't mean no one else has spotted I'm a girl. In contrast, the films often present her in a softer, more secondary light, a near-perfect companion to Harry, yet less of the revolutionary figure the books painstakingly crafted. From the very beginning, the books portray Hermione as a girl who is never afraid to confront rules when she deems them unjust. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, she begins as the archetypal rule follower, scolding Harry and Ron for breaking curfew. But her growth comes quickly. By the climax, she is the one who explains why sometimes breaking the rules is essential when greater values are at stake. This tension between order and justice defines her throughout the series. The films condense this complexity, often skipping moments that show her internal struggle and transformation. Instead, she is consistently portrayed as the voice of reason, the walking encyclopedia who always knows the answer, but not necessarily the rebel who shapes the moral compass of the trio. One of the most striking differences lies in her crusade for house elves' rights. In the fourth book, The Goblet of Fire, Hermione launches the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, or SPEW. Although her campaign is mocked by her peers and largely ignored by those around her, it reveals her commitment to fighting systemic injustice, even when it brings no personal benefit and little recognition. She spends hours knitting hats and leaving them around Gryffindor Tower, convinced that freeing house elves is worth her effort. In the films, this subplot is erased entirely. Without it, viewers lose an essential layer of her identity. Hermione is not merely brilliant, she is a social activist, someone willing to confront uncomfortable truths in her world. This omission makes her legacy appear smaller, as if her brilliance serves primarily Harry's journey rather than a broader vision for justice. The novels also highlight Hermione's moral courage in ways that foreshadow her political future. In Order of the Phoenix, she is the mastermind behind the creation of Dumbledore's army. It is Hermione who enchants the parchment that records members' names, who organizes the meetings, and who insists that Harry step into the role of teacher. Harry may have been the figurehead, but Hermione was the strategist. Rowling shows that she is not content to sit idly by while the Ministry spreads propaganda through Dolores Umbridge. She takes direct action, proving she can operate as a leader behind the scenes. The film adaptation acknowledges her role, but reduces her initiative, presenting her more as Harry's supportive voice rather than the architect of resistance. This shift changes the perception of her legacy. In the books, she is indispensable. In the films, she often feels supplementary. Even in moments of personal sacrifice, the books give Hermione a level of depth and agency that the films sometimes undercut. In Deathly Hallows, she modifies her parents' memories, sending them away to Australia so they will not be harmed by Voldemort's followers. The passage is devastating because it reveals her willingness to bear unbearable pain for the greater good. She erases herself from her parents' lives, an act that defines her courage and sense of responsibility. While this scene is briefly depicted in the films, the emotional weight is diminished by pacing. On the page, readers sit with Hermione's grief, feeling the full gravity of her sacrifice. On screen, it becomes a fleeting montage, a moment quickly passed, losing the profound statement about the character's selflessness and determination. Another defining quality of Hermione in the novels is her willingness to challenge authority. When Professor Trelawney makes predictions in divination, Hermione openly questions the legitimacy of the subject. In Prisoner of Azkaban, she famously drops the class in protest, unwilling to waste time on what she sees as nonsense. This is not mere stubbornness, it demonstrates her refusal to follow the path expected of her when she believes it lacks truth. Later, in Half-Blood Prince, she questions the morality of using the cursed book that Harry discovers, reminding him that power can corrupt even the best intentions. These are not just academic disputes, they show Hermione as a young woman forming her own worldview, one that values truth and integrity over blind obedience. The films retain some of this spirit, but sand down the edges, making her appear less confrontational and more agreeable. Rowling's Hermione is also central to the emotional foundation of the series. In The Philosopher's Stone, after surviving the Devil's Snare, she admits, "Books and cleverness, there are more important things, friendship and bravery." This is a turning point, the moment she accepts that intellect alone is not enough, that values matter even more. It is a profound statement about her growth, one that resonates through the rest of the books. The films include this line, yet without the same weight of her earlier rigid personality, it feels less transformative and more like a simple observation. The nuance of her development is lost when her early flaws, her arrogance, her insecurity, her bossiness, are downplayed on screen. Her relationship with Harry is another area where the difference becomes clear. In the novels, Hermione is often the one who grounds Harry, reminding him of perspective and reason. She supports him, yes, but she also challenges him, even at the risk of his anger. In Order of the Phoenix, she is the one who dares to tell him when his anger blinds him to the needs of others. She is never simply his sidekick, she is his equal, someone who shares the burden of leadership. The films, however, shift the dynamic toward portraying her as Harry's perfect companion, almost flawless, rarely in conflict with him. This not only simplifies her character but also undermines the sense that she is on her own journey toward greatness. When examining her legacy, the epilogue of Deathly Hallows is crucial. Rowling reveals that Hermione becomes the deputy head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, one of the most powerful positions in the Ministry. This outcome is perfectly consistent with the Hermione of the books. The girl who fought for house elves, who created Dumbledore's army, who rewrote her parents' lives for their safety. The Hermione of the films, however, does not seem as clearly destined for such a role. Without the activism of SPGW or the active boldness of her political stances, she feels more like Harry's brilliant companion than a leader in her own right. The audience is left to assume her potential rather than witness it unfolding. The omission of her activist streak is not a minor detail. It transforms the perception of her entire character. In the books, Hermione is often unpopular with her peers because of her intensity and passion for causes others dismiss. She is mocked for her efforts, but she does not stop. This resilience is what makes her inspiring. She is not universally adored, but she is respected. In the films, she is almost universally admired, polished into a model of perfection. This shift strips away the tension that made her so compelling on the page, the tension between being right and being liked, between doing what is easy and doing what is just. Another example can be found in her rivalry with Rita Skeeter. In Goblet of Fire, Hermione discovers Rita is an unregistered animagus and uses that knowledge to control the malicious journalist. This subplot demonstrates her cunning and her ability to use the system against those who abuse it. It is a glimpse of the politician she will become, someone who knows the rules but also knows how to bend them for justice. The films barely touch on this dynamic, robbing viewers of an important moment where Hermione shows she is more than clever and she is shrewd, capable of playing a dangerous game to protect her friends and the truth. Her complexity also lies in her flaws. The Hermione of the books can be infuriatingly stubborn, sanctimonious, and judgmental. She makes mistakes, such as her misjudgment of Professor Trelawney, or her arrogance in thinking she can outwork everyone else. Yet these flaws make her victories richer. By acknowledging her weaknesses, Rowling crafts a heroine who feels real, someone whose leadership is forged through failure as much as success. The films, in their attempt to present her as flawless, strip away much of this realism. A character without flaws may be admirable, but she is not as inspiring as the one who struggles and grows before our eyes. The legacy of Hermione Granger in the books is one of transformation and revolution. She begins as a girl who clings to rules and ends as a woman who reshapes them. She fights for the marginalized, organizes rebellions, and sacrifices her family for the sake of the world. Her story is one of leadership earned through relentless determination. In the films, her legacy is quieter, less radical, shaped to fit the mold of a loyal companion rather than a changemaker. While Emma Watson's portrayal is iconic and deeply beloved, the cinematic Hermione is ultimately a streamlined version, missing the rough edges that made the literary Hermione a figure destined to leave her mark on history. Number 23, Hermione and the Teachers. Under the flickering light of Hogwarts' enchanted torches, the Hermione Granger of the books reveals herself through constant friction with authority, a girl whose sharp mind rarely yields to tradition or title. In J.K. Rowling's pages, Hermione respects Professor McGonagall deeply, yet she is not afraid to act on her own judgment, even when the stern Transfiguration teacher disapproves. One remembers the moment in Prisoner of Azkaban when Hermione uses the time turner to save Sirius Black and Buckbeak. McGonagall had trusted her with the device for academics, not for altering fates, but Hermione's moral compass overrode her professor's intended boundaries, showing her to be a student who reveres her teachers but never becomes their passive echo. This layered portrayal vanishes almost entirely in the films, where Hermione often appears to be little more than the perfect pupil, brilliant but obedient, the one who nods rather than challenges. The written Hermione's sparring with Severus Snape stands as one of the most telling indicators of her willingness to confront authority. In Sorcerer's Stone, Snape sneers at her constant hand-raising, dismissing her knowledge as insufferable. Hermione's persistence, however, never falters. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Snape mocks her with the venomous words, "You stupid girl," after she tries to defend Harry during a confrontation, she is shaken but not silenced. Her defiance in continuing to answer, to learn, and to resist intimidation marks her as a character who refuses to shrink. For cruelty. In contrast, the films mute these exchanges. The cinematic Hermione rarely argues back, rarely earns Snape's open loathing, and thus the audience misses the vital dynamic of a girl daring to confront unfairness, even in the form of a teacher feared by the entire school. Her admiration for Professor Lupin provides another striking difference between the mediums. In the book Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione praises Lupin's practical teaching style in defense against the dark arts. She notices before anyone else that he is the most effective instructor they have had. Rowling gives her a line that reveals this instantly. He knows, really knows what it's like to face the dark arts. This insight reflects Hermione's ability to assess teachers critically, to separate true competence from showmanship. The films hint at this admiration but reduce it to background respect. She listens, she learns, but she is never given the space to articulate why Lupin matters so much. The Hermione who measures authority figures against her own internal scale of excellence fades into a simplified version who merely accepts their guidance. Perhaps the most dramatic divergence lies in her treatment of Professor Sybil Trelawney. In the books, Hermione's disdain for divination is sharp and unrelenting. She calls the subject woolly and storms out of class in Prisoner of Azkaban, declaring to Harry and Ron that it is a waste of time. The tension culminates when she openly confronts Trelawney's predictions, rolling her eyes at visions of doom and refusing to indulge the professor's mystical airs. Her exit from the class is not simply the rejection of a subject, but a profound statement of intellect over blind belief. This episode shows a Hermione who does not just absorb knowledge, but challenges the very legitimacy of what counts as knowledge. In the films, this conflict evaporates almost entirely. The audience sees Trelawney as an eccentric and Hermione as vaguely skeptical, but the explosive rejection, the storming out, the verbal dismissal that define her independence are stripped away. Hermione's relationship with Hagrid in the books also paints her as more than a mere follower of rules. When Hagrid is under pressure, accused of endangering students with his creatures, Hermione defends him passionately. She gathers evidence, urges Harry and Ron to prepare proper cases for Buckbeak's innocence, and shows that her respect for a teacher is not blind. It is rooted in loyalty and a sense of justice. In Prisoner of Azkaban, she says firmly, "Hagrid has never sent us into anything that was dangerous without telling us." The statement reflects both her protective loyalty and her capacity to argue logically in defense of a maligned authority figure. In the films, her bond with Hagrid exists but lacks that same intensity of intellectual defense. She looks sympathetic, yes, but the fire of advocacy, the conviction that her teacher deserves justice, is muted. Her clash with Dolores Umbridge in Order of the Phoenix epitomizes Hermione's spirit of resistance. In the books, she not only mocks Umbridge's shallow teaching of theory, but actively organizes rebellion through Dumbledore's army. She engineers the very system of resistance, outthinking one of the most authoritarian teachers in the series. The films depict her participation, but they streamline it into Harry's narrative, muting Hermione's strategic mind. The book, Hermione manipulates Umbridge into the Forbidden Forest with cunning deception, saving Harry and herself by exploiting her enemy's arrogance. That layered defiance against a teacher who misuses authority highlights her ability to confront, dismantle, and outwit oppressive power. The films make this a joint act, but they rob Hermione of the solo intellectual triumph that cements her as the mastermind. Books also grant Hermione moments of warmth and vulnerability with teachers like Professor Flitwick and Madame Pomfrey. When she is injured by a curse in Deathly Hallows, Madame Pomfrey fusses over her recovery, reflecting the trust Hermione inspires in authority figures. With Flitwick, she shares moments of academic triumph as he praises her spellwork. These interactions flesh out her identity as a student who earns not just respect, but genuine affection. In films, these quieter threads are cut, leaving her brilliance visible, but her emotional bonds with staff invisible. What remains is an outline, a clever girl who excels rather than a full character who navigates complex relationships with mentors and guardians. Even her interaction with Dumbledore himself shifts between book and film. In Half-Blood Prince, Hermione challenges Dumbledore's decisions indirectly, questioning why Harry is burdened with so much knowledge and responsibility. She worries, she analyzes, and she considers the flaws of authority figures, even one she reveres. The films reduce her to silent loyalty, gazing at Dumbledore with respect, but offering little critique. The absence of these moments weakens the sense that Hermione is not only learning from her teachers, but evaluating their wisdom with a critical lens, something that makes her stand apart from her peers. A pivotal example of this independent, critical voice appears in Goblet of Fire, when Hermione confronts Rita Skeeter's smear articles and recognizes that adults, even those in positions of authority like journalists or professors, can be corrupt or deceptive. While not a teacher, Skeeter represents adult authority. Hermione takes matters into her own hands, discovering Rita's animagus secret and silencing her power. The lesson is clear. Hermione will not passively accept authority when it is used unjustly. The films present Skeeter only briefly, diminishing Hermione's triumph and reducing her to a supportive role rather than the sharp-eyed investigator who dismantles lies. Hermione's conflict with authority is not always external. Sometimes it is directed inward. When she overuses the time turner, taking on an impossible academic load at McGonagall's approval, she nearly collapses under the pressure. In the book, this breakdown illustrates the danger of blind obedience to authority, even well-meaning authority. She learns that respect for professors must be balanced with care for her own limits. The films soften this collapse, showing only a hint of stress, never the profound exhaustion that reveals Hermione's humanity. The result is a character who seems flawlessly capable rather than one who stumbles, learns, and grows. The difference between book and film also shapes how readers and viewers perceive Hermione's bravery. In the novels, she is courageous not only in battle, but in conversation, where she speaks truth to power. Her courage is intellectual as well as physical. In the films, bravery is distilled into duels and spells, leaving the subtler form, the bravery of questioning a teacher, the bravery of saying no when everyone else stays silent, underdeveloped. Thus, the Hermione of the screen shines in action but not in confrontation with ideas. When Rowling wrote Hermione rolling her eyes at Trelawney's grim predictions, or snapping back at Snape's barbs, or strategizing against Umbridge, she built a girl who was not afraid of the weight of authority. These were not small moments. They shaped her arc. They made her more than just the clever friend of the chosen one. They established her as a young woman destined to challenge flawed systems, whether those systems wore the robes of a teacher or the crown of a ministry official. By streamlining these episodes, the films painted her as gifted but docile, removing much of the tension that defined her growth. The contrast becomes even sharper when one considers how the books deliberately show her mistakes in these confrontations. She misjudges Trelawney as merely ridiculous, missing the professor's genuine prophetic gift. She challenges Snape but cannot break through his disdain. She manipulates Umbridge but nearly gets caught. These flaws add weight to her defiance. They prove she is human. The films prefer to sand off those rough edges, showing her as more polished, more successful, but less real. In this way, they deprive her of the contradictions that make her memorable. Ultimately, the Hermione Granger of the books is inseparable from her teachers because her identity is forged in dialogue, conflict, admiration, and rebellion against them. Without McGonagall's trust, she would not learn restraint. Without Snape's cruelty, she would not learn endurance. Without Lupin's wisdom, she would not recognize true teaching. Without Trelawney's pretension, she would not assert her independence. Without Umbridge's tyranny, she would not harness her cunning. The films present fragments of these lessons, but rarely the full spectrum. The cinematic Hermione shines like a star, polished smooth, but the literary Hermione is a constellation, glittering with contradictions, defiance, and the brilliance of a mind unafraid to question even those who tower above her. Number 24. Hermione and Hufflepuff qualities. Hermione Granger's journey in J.K. Rowling's novels is not simply the story of a Gryffindor heroine. It is the layered portrait of a young witch whose traits span multiple houses of Hogwarts. When the Sorting Hat is placed on her head in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the inner monologue reveals a girl who could easily have found herself in Ravenclaw. Her intelligence, her thirst for knowledge, and her endless academic discipline point directly to the values Rowena Ravenclaw admired most. Yet when we examine Hermione more closely throughout the series, we find her defined by qualities far more nuanced. Her loyalty, her fairness, and her almost stubborn dedication to doing the right thing are all unmistakably Hufflepuff traits. Rowling allows readers to see Hermione not only as the embodiment of courage but also as the representative of the quieter virtues that Helga Hufflepuff held dear. The Sorting Hat itself teases out this complexity. In the book, Rowling writes, "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Ravenclaw would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that." Yet Hermione ends up in Gryffindor, and readers are encouraged to understand why. Her courage and her fiery determination outweighed her other qualities. But the point remains, Hermione could have belonged elsewhere, and Rowling makes sure we never forget it. She is not painted as one-dimensional. She is not only the girl who charges into danger, wand raised, she is also the girl who knits hats for house elves and spends hours in the library crafting plans for her friends. This richness creates a conflict of identity, never resolved fully but always present in the subtext of the books. The films, however, wash away this subtle layering. Emma Watson's Hermione, while brilliant, is rarely shown to wrestle with competing qualities or house values. The cinematic version condenses her into the archetype of a Gryffindor, brave, decisive, quick to act. The film audience never hears the Sorting Hat hesitate, never hears the quiet suggestion that Hermione's path could have diverged. The films simplify her into a straightforward heroine whose defining feature is courage, rather than the textured interplay of bravery, fairness, and loyalty. This simplification deprives us of one of the most intriguing character arcs Rowling developed, the possibility that Hermione is not merely a Gryffindor, but a girl who embodies Hufflepuff's virtues in equal measure. Consider Hermione's activism for house elves in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. the foundation of SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, is not the action of a Gryffindor seeking glory. It is instead the patient work of a Hufflepuff, motivated by fairness, equality, and a deep sense of justice. Hermione spends chapters knitting hats and socks, painstakingly placing them for elves to find. She sacrifices her time, her energy, and her reputation among peers, many of whom ridicule her efforts. These are not the loud acts of bravery we associate with Gryffindor. They are quiet labors rooted in compassion. Reflection of Hufflepuff's values. Yet in the films this entire subplot vanishes. The audience is left with a Hermione stripped of this loyalty-driven activism, reinforcing only her Gryffindor boldness and intelligence, while erasing the nuanced portrait Rowling created. Rowling also demonstrates Hermione's Hufflepuff qualities through her relationships with Harry and Ron. Her loyalty is unwavering. Even when Ron abandons them in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Hermione remains by Harry's side, enduring the cold, the hunger, and the loneliness. She chooses steadfastness over self-preservation, embodying Helga Hufflepuff's promise to take the rest and value loyalty above ambition. In contrast, the films dramatize Ron's departure but fail to explore Hermione's deeper motivations. For staying, Emma Watson's Hermione cries, yes, but the quiet loyalty, the sheer endurance born of Hufflepuff-like devotion, slips away into the background. The filmmakers miss the chance to show her as the girl who, even when everything falls apart, refuses to abandon her friends. Another critical example comes from Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban. In the book, Hermione carries a crushing workload with the help of the Time Turner. She attends extra classes, determined not to fall behind in any subject, even at the cost of her mental health. This relentless diligence echoes Hufflepuff's respect for hard work and perseverance. She succeeds, but she suffers greatly snapping at Harry and Ron, eventually breaking down under the pressure. It is not reckless bravery that drives her here, but the Hufflepuff-like trait of relentless industriousness. In the film adaptation, the Time Turner exists only as a plot device to save Sirius Black and Buckbeak. The exhausting detail of Hermione's effort vanishes, and with it, the portrait of her as a girl who works tirelessly, quietly embodying Hufflepuff values while still standing as a Gryffindor. The sorting hat's decision becomes even more significant when compared to how it treated other characters. For example, Neville Longbottom's bravery is doubted by the hat, yet his eventual heroism proves its choice correct. Hermione's placement, by contrast, feels deliberately complicated. Rowling allows readers to wonder if she might have been better suited to Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff, suggesting that the line between houses is blurrier than it seems. "You might belong in Ravenclaw if you've a ready mind," the sorting hat sings. And in Hermione's case, the line between Ravenclaw's wit, Hufflepuff's loyalty, and Gryffindor's courage forms a triangle that defines her character. The films erase this ambiguity, making her story less about choice and identity, and more about a simplified label, Hermione, the Gryffindor genius. One could argue that this simplification stems from the necessities of cinema. The films had limited time to develop subplots, and characters often became streamlined into archetypes. But in doing so, Hermione loses her potential as a mirror for readers who don't fit neatly into one category. Rowling wrote her as the embodiment of multiplicity, hard-working like a Hufflepuff, clever like a Ravenclaw, courageous like a Gryffindor. In the films, that mirror cracks. Viewers no longer see the girl who struggles to balance different traits, but only the version that fits the bold red and gold banner of Gryffindor. The question of justice further highlights Hermione's Hufflepuff streak. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Hermione becomes a driving force behind Dumbledore's army. While Harry provides leadership and charisma, Hermione organizes plans and ensures everyone is treated fairly. She insists that Neville, Luna, and even younger students be included. This inclusive spirit is profoundly Hufflepuff. She does not chase prestige or restrict entry to those deemed worthy. She believes in fairness, in giving everyone the chance to learn. The films reduce this to a brief montage of training, stripping away the moral undertones and flattening Hermione's role into that of a clever strategist rather than a crusader for equality. There is also the matter of Hermione's humility, another trait associated with Hufflepuff. In the books, she consistently downplays her achievements, uncomfortable with attention or fame. Even when praised for her intellect, she responds with embarrassment rather than arrogance. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, she suffers humiliation when her spells fail against the Half-Blood Prince's mysterious potions book. She does not lash out from pride, but instead shows frustration rooted in fairness. She hates cheating. This moral core is not the mark of someone hungry for glory, but of someone whose compass points to justice. Yet in the films, Hermione's humility is overshadowed by a constant aura of perfection. She rarely fails, rarely doubts, and never displays the vulnerability that makes her character multidimensional in the books. The complexity of Hermione's identity is essential because it shows readers that bravery does not exist in isolation. Courage without loyalty becomes reckless. Intelligence without fairness becomes arrogance. Hermione represents the balance of these forces. She charges into danger, yes, but she does so guided by Hufflepuff's loyalty and Ravenclaw's intellect. Rowling's Hermione is a harmony of houses, reminding readers that identity is never singular. The films reduce this harmony into a single melody, Gryffindor courage, loud and clear, but missing the quiet notes that give the character her resonance. The absence of the Hufflepuff dimension in the films also diminishes the broader message of Rowling's world. Hogwarts houses, after all, are not rigid prisons. Rowling repeatedly shows that people carry traits from multiple houses. Dumbledore himself admits, "Perhaps we sought too soon." Hermione is the embodiment of that idea. She proves that a Gryffindor can hold Hufflepuff's loyalty, Ravenclaw's intelligence, and still remain true to the values of her house. In the films, this philosophical message is all but erased. The audience sees houses as rigid categories rather than fluid identities, a disservice to the richness of the source material. The erasure also alters Hermione's legacy. In the books, she is not merely Harry's sidekick or the clever girl with answers. She is the moral anchor of the trio, the one who embodies fairness and loyalty when the others falter. Without her Hufflepuff qualities, Hermione becomes less of a moral compass and more of a functional plot device. She provides knowledge, solutions, and courage, but the soul of her character, the devotion, the fairness, the endless patience, is diminished. The girl who might have worn yellow and black as easily as red and gold becomes, on screen, something less than she is on the page. Ultimately, the distinction between book Hermione and film Hermione lies in this lost conflict. The books give us a character who belongs to Gryffindor but reflects the virtues of other houses, especially Hufflepuff. She is brave, but she is also loyal, fair, and hard-working. The films present her as the perfect Gryffindor, without the tension or the quiet battles that define her identity. The cost of this simplification is profound. The Hermione of the films is easier to admire but harder to relate to, while the Hermione of the books is imperfect, multifaceted, and real. Number 25. Hermione and Rita Skeeter. Hermione Granger's encounter with Rita Skeeter in the Harry Potter books is one of those rare storylines that reshapes how the reader perceives her. For much of the series, she is seen as the brilliant but rule-abiding student, the one who memorizes textbooks and corrects her friends' mistakes. But when Rita Skeeter enters the picture during Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Hermione is forced to confront a different kind of challenge, an adult journalist who spreads lies and thrives on sensationalism. In the novels, J.K. Rowling shows Hermione step beyond the safe boundaries of school rules and morality, embracing cunning, secrecy, and even blackmail to fight back. This transformation is not just entertaining, it reveals an edge to Hermione's character that deepens her role in the story. Yet in the films, this entire plotline is cut away, and as a result, audiences lose a powerful layer of who Hermione truly is. The books describe Rita Skeeter as a woman with enormous jeweled spectacles and a quill that scribbles on its own, recording twisted versions of reality. In Goblet of Fire, Skeeter writes a scathing article for the Daily Prophet, portraying Hermione as a manipulative girl who toys with both Harry Potter and Victor Crumb. Rowling's text does not soften the blow. The passage reads, "Miss Granger, a plain but ambitious girl, seems to have a taste for famous wizards. Harry Potter's best friend is currently toying with the affections of both Harry Potter and Bulgarian seeker Victor Crumb." For a 14-year-old, such public humiliation is brutal. Hermione is not only attacked personally but also accused of dishonesty, and her reputation is dragged into scandal. This conflict is essential because it forces Hermione into a battlefield of words and reputations rather than spells. What makes Hermione's response fascinating is the way she chooses to fight back. Instead of going to an adult or pleading her case to the public, she decides to investigate Skeeter's methods. Rowling places subtle clues in the text. Skeeter always seems to appear in places where she shouldn't, listening in on conversations she cannot possibly hear. Eventually, Hermione connects the dots and realizes the shocking truth. Rita Skeeter is an unregistered animagus who transforms into a beetle to spy on her subjects. This revelation is more than just a clever twist. It highlights Hermione's ability to notice what others overlook, her persistence in piecing together mysteries, and her willingness to confront corruption head-on. The moment when Hermione captures Skeeter is one of the most striking demonstrations of her growth. Rowling writes, "Hermione's eyes flashed as she held up the tiny glass jar, and inside it buzzed a very agitated beetle. Hermione has managed to trap the journalist in her animagus form, stuffing her into a jar and sealing it with an unbreakable charm. It is a shocking image. This young girl has literally imprisoned an adult woman. More shocking still is what she does with this leverage. She uses the jarred Skeeter as a bargaining chip, ensuring the journalist cannot publish her lies again without risking exposure. In essence, Hermione blackmails her. It is ruthless, it is strategic, and it is brilliantly effective. This act of blackmail marks a departure from Hermione's earlier image as the moral compass of the trio. Up until this point, she had been the one scolding Harry and Ron for breaking rules, reminding them of curfews, and warning them about the dangers of bending school laws. Yet here she is, taking the law into her own hands, holding someone captive in a jar. The key difference is motivation. Hermione does not act out of selfishness, but from a sense of justice. She knows Skeeter has harmed others, Harry, Hagrid, even Ludo Bagman, and she cannot allow it to continue. Hermione's choice shows that sometimes righteousness requires unorthodox methods. This nuance makes her a more complex and compelling character. In the films, however, none of this appears. The subplot of Skeeter's animagus identity, Hermione's investigation, and the glass jar is erased. Instead, Skeeter is reduced to a background nuisance who writes a couple of damaging articles before fading away. The films portray her as flamboyant but harmless, a side character with little weight on the plot. For casual viewers, Hermione never has the chance to reveal her investigative genius or her capacity for calculated aggression. She remains the clever but rule-following friend, stripped of the sharp edge Rowling carved for her in the books. The absence of this storyline has serious consequences for how audiences perceive Hermione. In the novels, she balances two sides, the studious perfectionist and the cunning strategist. She can quote textbooks, but she can also outwit an experienced journalist. In the films, the second side never emerges. This omission makes her flatter, more predictable, and far less intimidating. The version of Hermione who traps Rita Skeeter in a jar is someone to be reckoned with. The version of Hermione who simply rolls her eyes at a mean article is more passive, almost powerless in comparison. Consider also how this subplot strengthens Hermione's leadership within the trio. While Harry often stumbles into danger and Ron provides loyalty and humor, Hermione brings foresight and planning. By exposing Skeeter, she demonstrates that she is not only intelligent, but also resourceful enough to use her intelligence in real-world battles. Rowling's Hermione does not just talk about justice, she enforces it, even if it means bending the rules. This is leadership in its purest form, the ability to identify a threat, create a plan, and carry it through. Without this moment in the films, her leadership appears more academic than practical. There is also a symbolic element in the jar scene that the films miss. Hermione capturing Skeeter in her animagus form flips the power dynamic between youth and adulthood. In most of the wizarding world, children are powerless against adults, whether it is the cruelty of Professor Umbridge, the indifference of Cornelius Fudge, or the menace of Voldemort. But here, a 15-year-old outsmarts a professional journalist and holds her fate in her hands. It is a reversal of authority, and it carries a message about the power of observation and intellect over status. Cutting this from the films removes one of the rare moments where a young witch redefines the balance of power. What makes the loss even more striking is the way the books use Skeeter later. In Order of the Phoenix, Hermione leverages her control over Skeeter to publish Harry's side of the story in the Quibbler. She convinces the reluctant journalist to write an interview that exposes Voldemort's return, bypassing the propaganda of the Daily Prophet. Rowling writes, "The Prophet wouldn't print it. Rita Skeeter has agreed to do the interview for the Quibbler." Without Hermione's blackmail in Goblet of Fire, this collaboration would make no sense. The films, having skipped this foundation, simply invent a workaround, depriving the audience of the satisfaction of seeing Hermione's long game pay off. The relationship between Hermione and Skeeter in the books is not just about revenge, it is about control of narrative. Skeeter represents the danger of lies, half-truths, and the media's ability to manipulate public opinion. Hermione counters this not by shouting louder, but by seizing the tools of power and turning them back on their wielder. It is a sophisticated commentary on information warfare, and Hermione plays the role of strategist rather than victim. By cutting this arc, the films flatten the conflict into a childish spat rather than a battle over truth and reputation. It is worth noting that Rowling makes this subplot morally ambiguous on purpose. Readers are invited to question whether Hermione's methods are justified. She breaks laws about the registration of animagy, withholds Skeeter's freedom, and uses blackmail. Some might argue she becomes as manipulative as Skeeter herself, yet this moral tension is exactly what makes the story compelling. It forces the reader to consider whether justice is always clean, whether the ends can justify the means. The films, by avoiding this question, leave Hermione's morality unchallenged, presenting her as a static paragon of goodness rather than a layered character who wrestles with grey areas. The detail of Skeeter buzzing angrily inside a jar may be one of the most memorable images of Hermione's arc, precisely because it is unsettling. It is not the image of a schoolgirl doing homework, but of a strategist making hard decisions. It lingers in the imagination because it blurs innocence with ruthlessness. This duality, bright student and cunning tactician, makes Hermione stand out in the novels as more than just Harry's intelligent friend. Without it, the cinematic Hermione risks becoming one-dimensional. Ultimately, the loss of the Rita Skeeter plotline in the films weakens Hermione's evolution. Viewers see her intelligence, her loyalty, and her bravery, but they miss her capacity for manipulation, her ability to fight with weapons beyond spells, and her recognition that justice sometimes requires bending the rules. The books offer a Hermione who can take down not only Death Eaters but also corrupt journalists. The films offer a Hermione who reads books and casts spells. The difference between the two is the difference between a character who inspires fear and respect, and one who is simply admirable. Number 26, Hermione and Dumbledore's Army. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Hermione Granger's role in the creation of Dumbledore's army is one of the clearest examples of her intellect, her courage, and her ability to see further than her peers. Rowling carefully places her at the center of the idea, showing that Hermione does not merely follow the events, but directs them with precision. The novel makes it clear that she is the strategist behind the student rebellion against Dolores Umbridge, the one who turns vague frustration into organized resistance. Yet when one compares this to the film adaptation, the sharpness of Hermione's initiative is dulled, her strategic brilliance dissolved into a group decision, leaving viewers with the impression that her contribution was ordinary rather than extraordinary. The book paints a vivid picture of Hermione's foresight when she first proposes that Harry should take the role of teacher. She observes the incompetence of Umbridge's curriculum and recognizes the danger of being unprepared. In the text, Rowling writes, "You don't know anyone else who's had as much dark arts experience as you," Hermione told Harry, pressing the idea until he could no longer ignore it. This is not simply encouragement, it is persuasion crafted to break Harry's reluctance and awaken him to his responsibility. Hermione shows that she does not wait for others to act, but seizes the initiative when danger threatens the school. Her organizational skills are equally highlighted in the novel, for she not only plants the seed of the idea but cultivates it into reality. It is Hermione who suggests the meeting at the Hog's Head in Hogsmeade, ensuring that those who are truly interested can gather away from the prying eyes of Umbridge. Rowling emphasizes her careful preparation. Hermione had come armed with parchment and quills, determined to get names down. In this moment, Hermione is not merely a student, but the architect of a secret society, aware that careful planning and structure will determine its success. The scene at the Hog's Head becomes legendary among readers, and Hermione's role is unmistakably central. Most telling is her spell upon the parchment of names. This clever enchantment is one of the finest examples of Hermione's blend of intellect and practicality. She knew that betrayal was a possibility, that fear or manipulation could lead someone to reveal the group to Umbridge. To prevent this, she hexed the list so that any traitor would bear the scars of their treachery for all to see. Rowling notes, Hermione's eyes gleamed as she explained the jinx. "If anyone betrays us, the name on the parchment will show boils across their face. It is not a cruel act, but a calculated one, ensuring loyalty and protecting the entire group from collapse." The ingenuity of this move proves that Hermione is not only intelligent in theory, but ruthless when it comes to safeguarding her friends. In the film, however, this entire layer of Hermione's brilliance is erased. The meeting in the Hog's Head is depicted, but the initiative is softened into a collective discussion, with Luna Lovegood, Neville Longbottom, and others voicing their frustrations. Hermione suggests Harry as a leader, but without the same determination or strategic detail. The power of her persuasion is watered down into the voice of a supportive friend rather than a mastermind. The viewer never learns of her protective enchantment on the list, leaving the group exposed only to narrative chance. By omitting this, the film strips Hermione of one of her most significant demonstrations of foresight and magical skill. This change alters how audiences perceive Hermione's character. In the books, she is not simply the clever girl who excels in exams, but a revolutionary, willing to bend rules and take risks when the situation demands it. Her jinx on the parchment is not schoolwork, it is practical defense. By contrast, the films leave her role in the army's founding feeling passive. The heroic spotlight shines primarily on Harry, while Hermione's strategic mind is dimmed. For viewers who never read the books, Hermione may appear only as a loyal supporter, not the force that set the entire resistance in motion. One must remember the tension of that school year, for the ministry had installed Umbridge with absolute authority. Students were silenced, punished, and even tortured for disobedience. It is against this background that Hermione's actions become even more striking. She was a 15-year-old who challenged the authority of the Ministry of Magic within the walls of Hogwarts itself. By inventing the army and giving it structure, she transformed youthful frustration into organized rebellion. The story, as written by Rowling, shows Hermione as one of the bravest students of her generation, a figure capable of inspiring others to act. Her hex on the parchment is not only clever, but symbolic. It shows her awareness of human weakness, her understanding that betrayal can destroy even the strongest cause. The punishment was designed not only as a deterrent, but as justice. Traitors would be marked, unable to hide their treachery. The eventual exposure of Marietta Edgecombe, who betrayed the army, confirms Hermione's brilliance. The boils that spelled sneak across Marietta's face were unforgettable, a direct consequence of Hermione's foresight. In this moment, the novel gives Hermione triumph over treachery, cementing her role as the true protector of the army. None of this appears in the film, and so a crucial layer of tension and justice is lost. The absence of this detail also affects the portrayal of Harry. In the novel, Harry becomes the teacher, but it is Hermione who constructs the stage for him to lead upon. She is the reason he is able to inspire his classmates. In the film, Harry appears more self-starting, more of a natural leader without Hermione's influence. While Harry certainly deserves credit for his teaching and courage, the book makes clear that without Hermione's planning, there would be no army at all. The omission shifts the balance of power and undercuts the collaborative strength of the trio, turning a partnership into a simplified hero story. Another important aspect lost in the film is the sense of Hermione's moral ambiguity. By jinxing the parchment, she shows a side of herself that is willing to use harsh measures in the name of justice. It is a reminder that Hermione is not a flawless moral figure, but someone willing to employ questionable tactics to achieve righteous goals. Rowling crafts her as a character of depth, someone who struggles with the line between protection and cruelty. Without this subplot, the film presents Hermione as overly sanitized, always correct, always safe, rather than the complex, sometimes ruthless, leader she truly was. The effect of this alteration is seen in how fans discuss Hermione. Readers of the novels often cite her creation of the army and her protective spell as evidence of her leadership, while film-only viewers tend to remember her as the best student in class and a loyal friend. These are both true, but one identity is incomplete without the other. Hermione's genius lies not only in her grades, but in her ability to act decisively when the stakes are highest. By downplaying her role, the films unintentionally reinforce a stereotype of Hermione as the know-it-all rather than the strategist who built the foundation of rebellion. The films also lose a chance to highlight her courage in standing against authority. When she persuaded Harry, Hermione knew they were risking expulsion, punishment, or worse. Yet she pressed forward, recognizing that survival demanded preparation. Her jinx on the parchment shows she was prepared to face betrayal and fight back. The courage of these acts resonates deeply with readers, for they reveal Hermione's true growth. She is no longer the 11-year-old who feared breaking school rules, but a young woman prepared to challenge the ministry itself. Without these details, filmgoers miss one of the most crucial steps in Hermione's transformation.